There was no justification at all for what they did to our children.
And nobody is even saying anything about it. I mean, congrats to Dr. Phil for saying it, but the fact that you guys are still allowing these idiots, these women on The View, to sit there and feed these people these lies, nobody has taken any responsibility for the hurt and the harm that have been done with COVID and the lies and all of that other crap. Nope.
COVID hits 10 years later, and the same agencies that knew that are the agencies that shut down the schools for 2 years. Who does that? Who takes away the support system for these children? Who takes them away and shuts it down? And by the way, when they shut it down, they stopped the mandated reporters from being able to see children that were being abused and sexually molested, and in fact sent them home and abandoned them to their abusers with no way to watch, and referrals dropped 50 to 60%. So
there was also a pandemic going on, and they were trying to save
kids' lives. Remember, we know a lot of folks who died during this. So it wasn't, people weren't laying around eating bond, but, well, you know what? We're lucky. Maybe we're lucky they didn't, because we kept them out of the places that they could be sick, because no one wanted to believe we had an issue.
I'm saying it was the safest group. They were the less vulnerable group, and they suffered and will suffer more from the mismanagement of COVID than they will from the exposure to COVID. And that's not an opinion, that's a fact.
These women, The View, the teachers' unions, the CDC.
Disgusting.
They have blood on their hands.
Absolutely.
They have blood on their hands. And if you want to talk about propaganda, if you want to talk about miscommunication, misinformation, look at what happened during the pandemic, during the lockdowns. There was no justification at all for what they did to our children.
And nobody is even saying anything about it. I mean, congrats to Dr. Phil for saying it, but the fact that you guys are still allowing these idiots, these women on The View, to sit there and feed these people these lies, nobody has taken any responsibility for the hurt and the harm that have been done with COVID and the lies and all of that other crap. Nobody.
No. Let me, I want to get you in here, Shelley. I just want to say, I have never in my life known personally, so many teenagers that have committed suicide due to these lies. In my life.
Yes.
In my life. It is a travesty. It is so wrong. And just for this alone, you should vote for Trump. You should vote for Trump to get these people out of office. And I'm not even talking about just from the federal level, but from the state and local level on down. They have blood on their hands.
Absolutely. There again, you said there was no reason, right? During the scamdemic is what I call it.
Yeah.
Our children suffered. I know firsthand that children were with their abusers. I do know that because after they were allowed to go back into the schools, the hospitals were flooded with children being abused because they had 24/7 access. Their abusers had access to them because they were home with them. That's number one. Number two, the Dr. J. Badaraka and the Great Barrington Institute, the Brownstone Institute, and other organizations were putting out information, credible information. These are experts, if you want to call them that, PhDs, epidemiologists, that were saying at the time, stop this. The children need to be back in school. Our children are depressed. The anxiety is going out the roof. They are killing themselves. They're overeating, all of these bad things that were happening. But no, because of the teachers union and the power that they have over and with the Democrat Party, yes, the Democrat Party, again, they were slowly but surely killing our kids. And now the suicide rates are up, depression's off the roof, parents don't know what to do. You're talking about the transgender. These children are confused. The Democrat Party, from the time it began till now, is dripping, oozing with blood. This is why they like the blood so much. That's why I like to play in blood so much.
Ooh.
This is why they like to play. They are used to being bloody. They are the blood party.
Well,
That's what they
I want to get you in here, T, but before we do, I want to talk. I mean, one thing Dr. Phil did not come forward with are the actual data.
Yes.
And this is the data. The data supports what he said.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you have Sunny Hostin and Whoopi Goldberg pushing lies. And the data supports what Dr. Phil, and as you mentioned, the Barrington Institute and things like that have said. States that engaged in prolonged school closures didn't seem to have any fewer children die with COVID than those who kept schools open. A Daily Wire analysis of new federal data shows. The District of Columbia, they shut everything down, had the highest number of children who died with coronavirus per capita. 12 deaths equating to 95 deaths per million children. Even though its schools were almost completely closed for the 2020-2021 school year, with its school coronavirus policies arguably the most draconian in the nation. Wyoming, which has a nearly identical population size to DC, whose schools remained opened more than any other state, had the fewest deaths per capita. The data supports this. They were wrong, and they should be prosecuted for what they did.
Right.
There were so many things done wrong during that time. I mean, we did shows on this after shows during that time. It was awful. I mean, the way the children were affected, the long-term effects of this. You know, we're still seeing in schools that the kids are not writing well, they're not reading, they're they cannot regulate their emotions because they were, for at least a year, they were not in the proper environment, so they can't control their emotions now. And how about really small kids as well? So the first 3 years of a child's life is really important. And so there's small kids who were, 1, 2 years old, and they couldn't see other children of the same age. And there are some parents who thought that their kid was autistic,
but speech delay.
Yeah, but they weren't.
Exactly.
So
and hearing, because I'm sorry, in math, but go ahead, I'm sorry.
I will say that 2024 is the class that started school or went into high school. This is the graduating class from COVID. And I know for a fact that some guidance counselors, they've worked so hard to restore these children's their grades, their psychological needs, they have children that went to therapy because of this whole pandemic situation and them going to school over the computer and not seeing their friends and not being able to interact. So it's really taking a toll on them. And they're graduating this year. The ones that started high school, they're graduating this year, but it took a lot of work for them to get back to where they need to be.
But let's be honest, you guys. I mean, just as a whole, a nation as a whole, we don't think about our kids. We really don't. Our nation has abandoned our children completely. We're allowing people to tell them that you can put hormones in them and puberty blockers. We're allowing people to cut off their breasts. We have whole cities where kids cannot even read, but we have blacks marching for crackheads and drug dealers. No one cares about our kids. No one cares about our future. We have whole grown mothers, 40 and 45 and 50, doing TikToks while their kids can't read.
Exactly. Yeah.
We have a problem, you guys. Yeah. The problem is way bigger than we could ever imagine.
And it's bigger than Trump. You can't blame Trump.
Right. You can't blame Trump because your kid can't read.
That's right.
Yeah, right. You're right.
His kids can read.
Right.
Oh, and the entire school districts have problems.
Baltimore.
Yeah. Baltimore. I just found out today, well, because I do talk to people in the education community, and that in Baltimore, at least, I'm sure Baltimore County, at least Baltimore City, we're just talking about, homework, things like that. they don't require homework.
No.
They don't, like, what?
Yeah.
And the way that they say it is with so much authority. Like, we know better. These are like real officials. Homework should not be taxing. It's like, what? So they're not learning at school. They don't go home to learn anything, and then
they won't even test them to see what they learn.
They're getting all this tax money.
Just
violent.
Right. And they think that they're experts. These are the same kind of experts who shut down schools.
I tell you, these experts. And the crazy thing is, I don't even say crazy. The awful thing is that they're trying to delete or recharacterize what what has happened.
Rewrite.
But if you search deep enough, you can find this stuff. The Chicago Teachers Union tweeted out back on December 6, 2020. The push to reopen schools is rooted in sexism, racism, and misogyny. Yeah. These are the teachers' union. California Teachers Union back on union spied on parents who wanted schools to reopen during COVID. Emails support this. This is a New York Post headline. Daily Mail, radical AFT president Randy Weingarten, who pushed 18 months of school closures during the pandemic, is accused of gaslighting parents by claiming children suffered whether they learned remotely or in person. We know these are lies. These are lies. Once again here, back in January 2021, Chicago Teachers Union leader is blasted for pushing to keep schools closed because classrooms are, and I quote, unsafe, while she vacations in Puerto Rico.
And parents are not mad enough. And unfortunately, our nation has abandoned our children. Like, why do we? Nothing is focused on our children. Nothing but negative. Like nothing, even the laws, you guys, like not even teaching these kids. They're violent, they're angry, and then they're saying, oh, don't put them, like jail, it helps them to not, like, nobody cares about our future.
I'm sorry, because the parents are children themselves. Well, I mean, mentally.
Right. And let's get something straight. We talk about teachers union. Well, actually, the definition is in the title. It's the teachers union. They are advocating for teachers, for their pay, and for whatever other benefits that the teachers want. They don't give a damn about your students and our kids. They are advocating for their own professional organization. You all, I've said it many times, get your kids out of these schools. Yeah. They are doing more damage than any good. They're not reading anyway. They're not learning. They don't know how to do math. A whole city, like whoever said it, Crystal Yana, Baltimore, Chicago, LA, New York, all of these places. And yes, they happen to be run by Democrats. And many of them look like the four of us. Sorry, Yana.
Yeah. And speaking of that, speaking of corruption,
does it look like me?
Right, they are. Yeah, they certainly are.
Especially in where you live. Yeah.
But speaking of corruption, speaking of people we need to get out of office, we move on to Fannie Willis. So